Hello, everyone. This is Rochelle, the host of Oh, the Places You'll Know, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, JD, Jorge Delgado. Wave at the audience if you'd like.
Hello, everybody. How are
um,
you?
yeah, so JD is a friend of mine. He's from Peru and he's traveled there pretty extensively, so I thought he would be the perfect guest for my feature on Peru this week. Um, I'd like to encourage everyone, one, to join the event rather than watch it as a spectator. I see most of you have joined it already, which is great. And two, ask questions. That makes this so much more fun. So to ask a question, you can type it in the chat box, which you can see at the bottom right hand of the page, or you can click the Ask a Question button. It's in bright red, and click text question if you want to submit a text question, or if you're feeling bold, you can submit a video question. You might have to check your hardware first to make sure your webcam is set up. That's way more fun, and we'd love if you video call in, but if you can't, that's okay. A text question is also a lot of fun. So if you have any questions, see, people are already submitting questions. You guys are such pros. Um, we will get to all of them, so please submit them. It makes this a lot more enjoyable. So, um, today, obviously, we're talking about Peru. I have a few basic notes on Peru before we get started. Peru, the official name of Peru is actually the Republic of Peru, or in Spanish, República del Perú. I think that's right. You can correct me, JD, if I get anything wrong.
Will do, Rochelle.
um, but thank you. But so Peru is bordered by several countries: Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, Bolivia, and Chile, and the Pacific Ocean, which is kind of a mouthful. The official language is, of course, Spanish, and the population is almost 30 million people. It was the 2010 census, so I think by now they've probably reached about 30 million people. The currency is Nuevo Sol, and it's divided into 25 different regions. And from what I read, the geography of Peru is pretty diverse. There's, of course, the Amazon, and places like the Andes and very cold, icy mountains. It's kind of all across the board. I think that makes it a way more interesting country. And the capital is, of course, Lima. We've all heard of Lima. And the government of Peru is a presidential republic. The president is Alan Garcia, and the prime minister is Rosario Fernandez. Um, so those are kind of just the basics of Peru. But a few things that I wanted to dive into. Well, probably the one that I was the most ignorant about, and I wanted to ask JD about, was something called the Norte Chico civilization. I read about it literally today, and I was like, I don't think I've learned anything about this, but this was apparently the oldest civilization in the Americas. It existed at the same time as when the pyramids were built. Um, and I don't know, JD, maybe you can offer some insight on the Norte Chico civilization, because I really didn't know anything about them until I read about it on Wikipedia today. So go ahead.
Yeah, they're actually. It's a really interesting topic because a lot of people think of the Colombian and Mesoamerican civilizations as the Incas, which were very impressive, and the Mayans and the Aztecs. But there were a lot of societies that existed in the Americas before that. The Norte Chico civilization existed in one of the northern valleys, or was centered around one of the northern valleys in what is today Peru. Um, it had as many as about 30 population centers, so organized, I would say, city states. You're right, it is the oldest civilization in all of the Americas. So we're talking sort of 30th to 20th century before BC, before Christ. So a long time ago. And what's interesting about them is that yes, they were around during the time or concurrently with the Egyptians, and they shared a lot of their traits. The Norte Chico had no ceramics, which a lot of people associate ceramics with these kind of civilizations, pottery and things like that. Norte Chico had no ceramics, and they had no real developed artwork. So the one thing that we do have from them, the remains to this day, is their monumental architecture. So that is sort of their signature that is left with us today. So you have a lot of these great earthen mound pyramids. So I would liken them to sort of like the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, and kind of pyramidal structures like in Egypt. But they also had these deep plazas they would dig into the center of their cities, which is sort of also pretty interesting.
Wow, that is really interesting. And I like what you were saying that they didn't have ceramics. Like, I do feel like we associate that with all ancient civilizations, but the fact that they just didn't have that makes kind of sets them apart. Um, but of course, I also have to talk about the Incan Empire. That's just such a classic, I guess, image that we have of ancient Peru or that region, I guess. And they were, of course, the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. So um, I guess I know that their Mecca was in Cusco, or what is now Cusco, Peru. And I know that there was the history of Spanish conquistadors and Pizarro and all that that happened there. But I definitely need a little bit of a refresher on that. And I also know their language was Quechua, um, and I think that's still
Yeah.
spoken in Peru today. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and just sort of like how Incan culture has continued on in Peruvian culture in general.
Right. I mean, the Incas are the one thing that I think are very closely associated with Peru as far as history goes. And at their height, which is going to be right around the mid the 1500s, um, you had them stretching as far as northern Ecuador and all the way into what is now central Chile. They actually began as a small city state, a small enclave, something called the Quilique culture, which was around Cusco and the Lake Titicaca region. So what you most associate with the Incas is where they actually started. And with that, they basically expanded outward, first into the coast, and then along the mountains, as basically a warrior culture that brought a whole bunch of these peoples um, together. So at the end, what you had were what we called these suyus, which were these basically the lands that they called the four suyus, and Tiwantin suyu was all of the Incan Empire brought together. So you had the mountainous regions, the more coastal regions, and then further things up north. Um, but other than that, I would say it was the most famous historically, and I think that they were obviously the last ones that were there before Pizarro.
Right. Um, and obviously, we have probably the most famous relic of the Incans is Machu Picchu. And I know you visited there. And by the way, JD is frozen. I think it's not just for me, it might be for everybody.
Oh,
But as long as we can still hear him, that's good. Let us know if you all see him as frozen. But yeah, Machu Picchu, you were able to visit it, and obviously, I think that's probably the most famous tourist destination of Peru. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about Machu Picchu and sort of what it was.
sure. Where Machu Picchu was basically it served as a city, a small city just for the Inca, which was the king. So you could think of it as a Camp David of these sort of Colombian civilizations. Um,
Hmm.
it's really interesting going. I've been several times. I visited three times now. I've gone by myself. I've taken different friends, and every time you go, it is just as magical. You're hit with
Oh
the
yeah, I
beauty
bet.
of the placement of this in the middle of the Andes. The last time I was there was actually last summer, and I saw the more times I've gone, I've seen it more and more crowded, which is I think it's good and bad. I'm glad that people are able to see it. But at the same time, I would definitely want to sort of preserve the beauty that it is. And at its height,
Right.
it could actually sustain about 400 people. Um, Sort of, if you've been there, you know that it's not a large space. So sort of understanding that you can have 400 people there at once living there sustainably. Um, uh, it was quite amazing. At the same time, when the Inca, the king, wasn't there, there were only about 100, 120 people on site. So it was something that when the Inca was captured, the last Inca Atahualpa was captured. The trail from the last city that the Spanish conquered to Machu Picchu was actually burned in order to preserve that. And for a while, that was going to be the hub
Oh.
of the resistance. But the resistance sort of flared, sort of fizzled out.
We have a quick question that's about, I believe, Machu Picchu that we're gonna take. Um, how do you get to it? Do you drive or hike? Maybe you can answer that quickly.
Sure. Well,
Okay,
the
phone.
first points the first point access is going to be flying to the city of Cusco, which is up in the mountains. that used to be the capital of the Incan Empire. From there, what you would do is there are no roads that will get you there directly, so you have to take a train. The train takes about 4 hours from Cusco, actually probably closer to five, to the city called Aguascalientes, which is at the base of the mountain that the Cusco is on. And from there, most people stay. It can be done in a day trip, but some people can stay the night. I always recommend that people stay the night because going up very early on when there are the least amount of tourists is actually the best time to go see it. Um,
Hmm.
you can do that. The second option is to do the Inca Trail. The Inca Trail will actually you can actually walk from Ollantaytambo, which is a city halfway between Cusco and Aguascalientes, and it's a 3 day. Sorry, it's a 4 day, 3 night trek where you're actually taken with
Ooh.
the porters and you camp out as you go along. It's really, yeah,
Cool.
it's quite challenging, but at the same time, I think that it's a great way to sort of arrive at the site. And when you go through, you arrive through what's called La Puerta del Sol, which is basically the gate of the sun, which used to be the main entrance to the city itself.
Oh, cool. Wow, there's a lot of options there. Thanks for that. That's super comprehensive, JD. All right, perfect. We actually have a broadcast call, which is super exciting, especially since you're frozen. So we get another like moving image besides my face. So we're gonna go ahead and take that and see how it goes. So,
Okay. All right.
perfect. Thank you,
Headphones
Susan.
in.
So go ahead and
Hi.
ask JD your question.
Okay. Well, it's really, really silly, and I didn't want to actually say what the question was because I didn't want the filter people to be like, "Oh, let's not even bother with that one." So
We don't
I
have
had a
filter
friend of
people.
mine who went to. Oh, I had a friend of mine who went to Chile to study abroad, and he's Peruvian. And there was this tranny who was talking about how she was, or he, whatever, they were Peruvian. And then my friend was just like, "Oh, I'm Peruvian too." But it turns out that this tranny was just being mean and trying to scope out Peruvian people in Chile. And then she's like, "I freaking hate Peruvians." So why is it? And this I hear from a lot of people across the board. It's that Chileans just do not like Peruvian people at all. Like,
Hmm.
what potato did you steal from Chile?
JD,
Why
maybe you can
are
offer some insight on this.
yes?
Sure, Rochelle. Actually, could I ask you to repeat the question briefly because I didn't get some of that.
You got a little choppiness. She's basically talking about Peruvian Chilean relations, and she was saying that there seems to be some beef
Mm-hmm.
there. Can you maybe hypothesize why that may be?
Sure. Well, there's been, I would say historically, there's a lot. It's very charged historically, and I think in talking about the modern age, ever since independence, which was right around the 1820s, there's been this sort of proliferation of American republics. For a while, there was an idea to create a sort of a United States of South America, but because of society, that sort of fell apart. And so what you had was all these different republics forming, and very much economic and political contentions arose. There was a war, I think in the 1870s, the War of the Pacific, that fuels a lot of this still sort of continued. I would say, sort of ill will is I think a tough word, but I think sometimes it gets to that. Um, but I think that the relations are also very cultural. When you talk about things like pisco, which is I would say, in my view, a Peruvian liquor that Peruvians are very proud of. It's sort of the Peruvians drink. Some Chileans have claimed that pisco is actually Chilean, so this is actually an ongoing sort of debate.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And if
Yeah,
you
I've
talk
heard
about
that
it more
too.
recently, there's also been a maritime dispute. More recently, there's been a maritime dispute between Chile and Peru. Obviously things, there's no war recently that's happened or in the near future, but I think that culturally and in venues like that, socially, you'll see Chileans and Peruvians get into sort of verbal spats, which is always fun, especially from my
Yeah,
end
that
when I
sounds
want
fun.
to defend the homeland.
Right. Cool. Well, thank you for your call, Susan. Do you have any other questions before we take another one?